You know, Cody, sometimes two things that seem very similar are in fact very different.
Absolutely.
Like us, for example.
Prime example.
We're both bros.
Absolutely.
You know, but you're kind of like a hipster, wannabe, whatever, and I'm kind of like a super famous
YouTube
YouTuber.
sensation.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that's how we're.
Yeah.
One way in which we're different.
So from a surface level, we seem just
identical,
like bros, but really when you zoom in,
could it be more different?
Songwriting is also
that's
like
the dichotomy of our friendship. I feel like.
Yeah, it really
I
is.
feel like we've been able to balance each other out for how different we are with the anchor of how similar we are.
That's and that's really where the beauty of the human experience intersects.
That's probably why we've been going on 10 plus years now.
Man, still going strong.
Still going strong, man.
My guy.
Bros.
Today we're going to talk about how songwriting can be very, very different for writing maybe traditional like songs with lyrics as compared to cinematic film scoring, visual-based songwriting like what you do.
Yeah.
Okay?
So music's always been a very visual thing to me. So I knew I loved music not from listening to records, but from like watching movies. So as a little kid, watching like Tim Rice style Disney movies was how I learned that I loved music and I wanted to be a part of it. So the music I listened to at a young age was very visual in that way. It painted a much bigger picture because it wasn't trying to fill do the narrative for what someone wanted to do lyrically. It was for what someone was trying to do present visually. That's always been my relationship. So it's not a surprise that I went into that world and that's the career I pursued, but also I of course write that way as well.
And me, I was more of like listening to artists that I like, on the radio, whatever, got into deeper stuff. But I want to actually use something that you're playing as an example of how this can be different as far as writing with lyrics in mind and storytelling through the actual arrangement of a chord progression or something.
Sure. So this one is something called Carousel. It's going to be on something I'm going to be releasing later on this year. And it is a very visual piece of music because it's a very kind of whimsical and it kind of glides. It's simple, but it definitely has a visual aspect to it to me, or at least that's why,
Cool.
I got there.
All right, let's play it.
Simple, but effective.
Beautiful. Now let's talk about what's actually going on there from a musical standpoint, okay?
Sure.
So two types of chords, major 9 to a major 6. So for those of you at home playing along, it starts with the E root, middle finger, 7th fret on the A string, index finger 6th fret on the D string, pinky 8th fret on the G string, ring finger 7th fret on the B string. Okay? You just kind of finger styling like that. When you take your middle finger, move it up a string, we're changing the bass note from an E to a B. So the first chord is an E major 9. The second chord, technically, is a B major 6, okay? Now, right there on its own, that could be prevalent in songwriting, in scoring, in any kind of music. But what happens next is you're taking this exact same progression, which would be like a 4-1 progression, is how maybe a songwriter would see it.
Sure.
And you're moving the whole progression together from a C major 9 to a G major 6.
Yeah, and that's kind of the point of it is that it's keeping the same shape, but we're trying to create a lot of movement. And see, it's funny, this is the perfect thing we're talking about. In your mind, you're breaking down how you would approach it in a song.
Right.
For me, it's like, well, visually, what am I trying to do? And I'm trying to keep something super simple and concise, but create space so when I can move within that space on the fretboard and so I'm doing two things there. One, I'm creating space by using the same shape over the span of the fretboard, and I'm creating kind of a whimsical feel.
Sure.
But it's also going to be in 6. And I think, and the waltz in general has a big flow, and that's kind of why it's called a carousel. It's because it to me is visually think of an old carousel in France. It's moving up and down. You have all these old romantic looking pieces and they're floating upside down. You're getting movement there, but it's also going in a circle or you're getting movement there. And it kind of has this cool, very beautiful, but simple feel like a carousel.
Right, and from a songwriting perspective, that would be explained as moving a progression, 4-1, in intervals. A 4-1 progression, and then you could say, okay, if we're in the key of E, you could find a C and be like, oh, well, that's a degree of it, but that's not really how a songwriter would communicate. It'd be like, same progression, down 2 steps. Same progression, up a step. And then to the next one, right? But if you were to add lyrics to it, I think it would be a challenge for a lot of songwriters. And that's kind of like the difference between visual-based music, and that's where the storytelling, I think, comes into it. Whereas a lot of times, and again, not as a rule, but I think a lot of times, you know, if I'm writing a song or something, you know, I'll have a progression and I'll put lyrics on top of it to help tell the story. And the progression is still very interconnected with what I would say most writers are trying to say. I think in visual-based music, though, because you have a visual that is literally changing locations, right? You're looking at something and it's changing.
Right.
And the music, the progression can change with it, and the feelings change. That's why I think the progressions are what change, more so than lyrical melodies within one progression.
And if I can bring a point, that's a really important thing to bring up, is that generally speaking, so I do put out bodies of music that certainly are a cinematic feel, but don't have necessarily have a specific visual, just, you know, maybe I have a story in my mind I'm trying to, like, musically represent.
Sure.
But for a lot of time, you're just getting, like, bulk footage. And it's not even necessarily the final cut, it's just like, hey, here's probably what the scene's trying to accomplish. So you either want to have a consistent theme, and that's like the main title theme. Like take the video game soundtrack I did for Walk in the Dark. You have the main title, and then we slow it down, we speed it up, we make it minor, we make it sad, we make it happy to kind of fit. But that way the audience always has an anchor of what's familiar.
And even like from a popular example, like John Williams with Star Wars. Like Star Wars, like A New Hope or something like that. Like one of the great soundtracks of all time that people are very familiar with. There's like a main theme, which is like the Force. A lot of characters have their own theme, but they all kind of coalesce together. There are variations on themes that happen.
There's and here's, I'll take it even not one step further than Star Wars got, you know.
There's no such thing. Yeah,
but my mind takes it one step farther, where when someone hands to me, like the video, let's just use a video game for instance. Like to me, I had the title, the main theme, and that was like what represented the body of music.
Sure.
I had Ariel, the main character. I had her theme. I had the cat, Bass. I had his theme. And more importantly, I gave them their own instruments. So the piano would always represent what the audience was. It was the perspective of the audience. Like, it was just like, okay, I'm here as a viewer. And the piano was always like the narrator almost. It's the foundation, right?
Sure.
Now, I thought she always was very beautiful, very whimsical. So we used a lot of woodwinds for her. Just kind of flowing. And the cat was a little more menacing. He's a cat. He's still ride or die. You know, he's still a bro. He's there to help her.
Right.
So he was always going to be lower end strings. And the two of them would play together. So in the level, when one's jumping up and down and we're waiting for the other one, those instruments would react to each other using the same things we previously brought in, that is their main themes, and you get some really cool call and answer there. Now, how does that play here? Well, even though this is technically a piano place for people playing on guitar, we're creating a lot of cool movement and space that kind of paints a narrative.
In a simple way.
In a very simple, because it has to be simple.
And that's why the intervals you choose are so important.
And exactly. And the reason why...
and I just, really quick, just the weeds of it. 2 steps, that's like a major third that these are spaced apart, which is, I think, why it's still, like, kind of a beautiful thing. Like, you can make it...
Because that's an interval the ear loves.
You know, you can still make those pretty chords, but start moving them in minor thirds, and it gets dark.
Correct.
You know what I mean? So that's just kind of like one variation.
And you have to keep it simple, because especially when you're using like a lot of strings, a lot of woodwinds, you're going to be doing a lot of layering. So you need to give yourself as much space as you can. So as you're laying instrumentation, everything has its right place. You know, and you can accomplish that different ways. Like in that new thing that I released last week. You know, we'll have the percussion being a lot of dark, thunderous that we put a lot of low end, but we put it in the far distance.
Sure.
So it always feels like the storm that is always going to be around the corner. And that creates a little sense of anxiety, I think. And it plays a musical part, but it always feels like it's looming. And you know that the next track is not in the distance, it's right on top of you because you've entered that storm.
Sure.
Right. And then that piece, Olivia, the main character, that's her journey. And she goes to meet the sirens, and there's a big narrative piece to it, and that storm is here now.
And I think that's just like storytelling in classical style music, because most film visual music is kind of classical. And it's almost like kind of like one of the few ways that modern people listen to classical music. But really, this all came from, you know, back in the day.
And that's not by accident. The reason why we use classical music is because it's timeless. The problem with a lot of, like, let's take the 80s. The 80s is known for kind of its music and its fashion. But if you look at a lot of the great movies, look at like Blood Simple, for instance, right? Coen Brothers movie. A fantastic movie, but the thing that kind of, the only part of that movie that doesn't hold up is the soundtrack. Because of these really big, you know, monophonic synths and...
Oh, yeah, for sure. And it dates it.
It dates
Whereas
it.
the classical music score will always have it.
Right.
So anyways... check out this guy's music. I'm going to link you to below.
The Olivia Suite.
Yeah, and then let us know what you guys think some of your favorite classical music pieces are. And just kind of your thoughts on songwriting, traditional, classical, however you want to do it.
Yeah, hit me up on Instagram. I'm at Cody.cook. Definitely let me know what your favorite soundtrack is, who your favorite soundtrack composer is, and I want to know why, because I have mine, and I feel I can argue it through and through, and I'm always kind of curious why people latch on to the composers that they do.
Sounds good. All right, man.
Cool, man.
See you later.